Hey everyone, Rascal here.
And Mama, welcome to our channel, Paws On Animation.
In today's podcast, we're covering Disney's classic, Pinocchio.
He's a red-like boy. There have been endless retellings of the story, and so many of them that back in 2023, we had 4 Pinocchio retellings released in that one year.
I don't know why.
But we wanted to get back to the most enduring and possibly best versions out there.
But before we start with that, be sure to like, subscribe, click the notification button on future podcasts and Pause videos.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining, sharing our videos, commenting, and subscribing. We appreciate you so much, our specials.
Yes.
So Pinocchio, this version done by Disney, is a 1940 American animated musical fantasy film.
Another musical.
By Walt Disney Productions and released by RKO Radio Pictures. Now, it says it is based loosely on Carlo Collodi's 1883, we said it right, 1883 Italian children's novel,
Yeah.
The Adventures of Pinocchio. We'll talk a little more about that in a moment. But we wanted to let you know that for this particular movie, there were 2 directors supervising, 5 sequence directors, 8 story writers.
Oh my gosh.
And only 1 producer.
Oh gosh. Wow. And we ended up having to watch this movie twice because there was a large gap between the first time we watched it and then the recent time we watched it.
Definitely.
And one point is, like we said, there were 4 retellings of the story last year. And the one that started all off was Disney foolishly remaking it in the live action and upending the whole story, as we'll get into when we talk about the film itself. Then we had Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which is the only one people actually did like and watch. And you had another one from Russia with Pauly Shore, Father!
Which we did cover! With Andrew.
Right. And then one was actually a video game where it was a heavy, dark thriller drama set in a dystopian fantasy, and people actually liked that one. So, what the heck was the deal last year with Pinocchio stuff?
Yes, so thank goodness for this 1940s film.
Right.
Because this has runtime of 88 minutes, and as you mentioned, as long as it stays within that certain range, it does well. It was originally released in the U.S. February 23rd, 1940. Had a budget of $2.6 million. And earned over $164 million.
Wow, quite a bit.
So another blockbuster for Walt Disney.
Yes.
And we did mention to you that it was adapted from Collodi's book. Well, who was he? I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. He was an Italian who wrote children's books. He also did political satire and journalism. And this work basically is his legacy to his life entirely. He did other things, but this is the one that stood out. He translated the French fairy tales by Charles Perrault, who you know from Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella. And he created a character called Giannettino and also Lorenzini. So Lorenzini became fascinated by the idea of using an amiable, rascally character as a means of expressing his own convictions through allegory.
Right.
So when you're seeing the movie and reading the story, these are the personal opinions and convictions of that particular author.
Right.
So in 1880, Collodi began writing Story of a Marionette, also called The Adventures of Pinocchio. And in 1940, Disney adapted that, and it's considered to be one of Disney's greatest films.
Right.
So that was really interesting to learn that this is where it came from, a story that old. So when you're seeing the animation in the story, when you're seeing the time period it takes place in, now you know it's not that someone just decided, I'm going to write a story that takes place in an older time period. The story was literally written during the time period the movie takes place in.
Right.
Fun fact.
Right, that's fun fact. And another thing we learned, actually before we even saw the movie, was that the original stories of Pinocchio were actually much darker, to a point where Del Toro was actually closer to the adaptation than Disney. Pinocchio was not a nice kid at all, or a nice puppet, marionette, whatever. And the point of the story is Pinocchio constantly getting in trouble and just being disobedient. It was to teach kids what happens when you don't listen to your parents, when you're disobedient, when you break the rules or break the law or things. There are major consequences to not doing the right thing, and they're very severe in his story. Mm-hmm. Now, they do have that in here, and it's turned to a degree where, because this boy did not go to school and listen to Geppetto, he ended up doing everything wrong from that point on. So the message is still there, just in a less cruel way that the book had, because the book had Pinocchio no longer existing in the end of the story.
And remember, this reflected his own conviction.
That's right.
So this was a personal story someone told through a marionette.
Right.
So that explains the darkness.
Right.
And that explains why he chose to off the character. That means he had a very dark conviction and way of thinking and belief system.
And right.
So I want to mention quickly that in 2000 it was a live action made for TV remake based on this story, told from Geppetto's perspective, that was released on ABC. And the live action remake of the same title by Robert Zemeckis was released in 2022 on Disney Plus. So what I think is interesting, that they decided to come back and do a perspective from Geppetto a second time. It had been done once 22 years prior, and then they did it again. It's like now you're just beating the dead horse. Right. Another way to put it, leave it alone.
Right. And the story you got from here is to parallel what happened with the book in a family-friendly manner. Pinocchio had to learn to be a boy in order to get his wish, where they have the blue fairy come in. Geppetto wants him to be a real boy. He wants to be a real boy, so he has to learn how to be a boy before he can become one. So the main thing in here is Jiminy is his conscience. He teaches him right from wrong. He's not keeping up with him very well, unfortunately. And biggest things in here became, of course, famous, is that when he lies, his nose grows. Mm-hmm. And they'll know if he's done what he's supposed to, if the nose grows or not, when he tells them what happened. Mm-hmm. And when they did the remake, Pinocchio's nose didn't really grow unless it was on purpose. And he used the idea from Shrek. Because in this classic, Pinocchio didn't know better, so he just lied thinking it was fine. And he had to learn it was wrong. And he kept making bad choices because he didn't know any better. In the live-action remake, Pinocchio kept making all the right decisions. He didn't have to learn anything. And when his nose grew, he lied on purpose to help his way out. Like, they took the scene from Shrek. So basically, Pinocchio had no flaws anymore. He already could have been a real boy all this time. It's like, why did you remake the movie?
Well, that was someone else's conviction.
Conviction
being shown
right.
The movie.
The conviction is you can do no wrong.
Oh, we don't agree with his. Let's do our own.
Right, like,
that's what happened.
The conviction was, I can do no wrong.
Yes. So some really groundbreaking things that happened with this movie. Mm-hmm. The first was that in 1940s, having the effects of giving realistic movement to vehicles and machinery, as well as rain, water, and lightning, and smoke and shadow. Those things weren't being done in animation during that time, so it was groundbreaking in 1940. And also, it won 2 Academy Awards. One for Best Music, Original Score, of course,
wow.
When You Wish Upon a Star.
Yes, which is very important.
It also became one of the greatest animated films ever made. And when Rotten Tomatoes was not rotten, it earned 100% rating on their website.
Wow.
And still to this day, the film was relearned, and characters are prevalent in popular culture. As we mentioned, having 4 releases in 2023.
Right.
And in 1994, this movie was added to the United States National Film Registry for being deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Yes, it's amazing. And I'm glad you mentioned the song, because there had been a point later on with Disney, and not just with Wish, but just this company in general, where wishing became something you almost forgot was a huge part of the of the early films. And yes, we did notice that a lot of times characters did wish upon stars. And in this one took the form of the blue fairy to help the other's wishes come true. And then they got to learn to make it come true and learn the ways to do it. So this was always, truthfully, as a part of the Disney films.
Mm-hmm.
So what's really sad is that you hear When You Wish Upon a Star in here. And then you had the Wish movie itself supposedly saying, well, this is how the song came about, how it became the most iconic song in Disney history. Then you chose not to show the song that the man wrote. You deleted it, the original song, and then play a few notes of the old song and then cut it out. So it's almost a sad thing to see, where you get this wondrous feeling when you hear the song in here, and then now they've chosen to lightly play you a few notes of it, like, yeah, you remember this song? Yeah, we're done with that. And then they keep moving along to get, and then once you sing pop songs, don't sing that. And you just watch this, and it's a whole different feeling watching this type of movie versus the newer type of movies they have out, and especially watching the remake attempting to fix all the issues of the first film that didn't exist, but they made exist.
I think one of the best things about this movie when you're watching it is seeing that finally, in the end, Pinocchio understands that one of the biggest ways of caring and showing love for someone else is he sacrificed himself to save Geppetto.
Yes.
And only then did the Blue Fairy turn him into a real life boy. And during the entire movie, you see all these temptations that are represented by these horrible characters.
Right.
That he's being presented with.
Right.
And as you mentioned, he keeps making the wrong choices. He's not very pleasant. He keeps making wrong choices. Jiminy Cricket didn't do his job. He's fired. But finally, in the end of the movie, this version shows that he learns the lesson.
Right.
And there is a happy ending. And I think that's another thing that stands out for this movie. This is still during a time in decades when Disney movies had really, truly happy endings.
Right.
And they were not campy or syrupy or saccharine.
Right. Or you couldn't take it seriously.
Exactly. And they did this so well. And I think that's why probably it ends up being a favorite of millions and millions still. Mm. Pinocchio as a character, not so much. But the movie itself, and what it presented and how it was adapted to reflect a different set of convictions, in the end being put to rest with the one noble deed and the understanding that if he didn't do something, Geppetto was going to die.
Right.
And he chose to save him. I think that's what makes this such a wonderful movie, and a movie that definitely is going to stay around longer than all the ones that came out in 2023.
Right. Is that right? Still, after all this.
So let's quickly give a shout out to the cast members, as we always like to do. Dick Jones is Pinocchio, and Jones also voiced Alexander, the boy who's turned into a donkey.
Oh my gosh, right.
We'll have Cliff Edwards as Jiminy Cricket. And of course, I'm sure this became his most famous role.
Right.
Christian Rubb as Geppetto. Clarence Nash as Figaro, the pet kitty. Mm-hmm. And Walter Catlett as Honest John Worthington Fourfellow.
Oh gosh, he gets a full name.
He also voiced Gideon the cat as well. We had Charles Judels as Stromboli, the puppeteer who buys Pinocchio.
He's crazy.
He also voiced the coachman.
Also crazy.
Yes. Evelyn Venable as the Blue Fairy. And it says live action references for the Blue Fairy were provided by Marge Champion, who served as the live action reference for the titular heroine in the Snow White and Seven Dwarfs.
Oh my gosh.
Well. Last view, Frankie Darrow as Lampwick. Stuart Buchanan as the Carnival Barker, Turl Ravenscroft as Monstro, who we also mentioned in The Sword and the Stone. And the voice cast was all uncredited
Oh, that's why we
because
were
this was
seeing
still
them.
the practice at the time for many animated films. So, as always, we like to give credits to them, regardless of whether they're here or passed on, because this movie is a legacy that is being left to be enjoyed by millions, not just now, but in the future. And thank goodness you can still probably purchase it
Right.
or go to Disney Plus. But I'm just
Oh,
grateful
yeah.
we still have it to enjoy
Right.
based on what we've got now. So, if you've watched Pinocchio, the 1940s movie, let us know what you think in the comments. Is it still relevant to you? Or do you think one of the other four that came out last year did the job better?
Right.
And if you haven't seen it, it's available on Disney Plus for sure. And hopefully you can still purchase it as a physical DVD.
Yeah. And if you haven't already, subscribe for updates and movie videos for your anime series, anime shows, and all things animation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, subscribing, sharing our videos, commenting, and so much more. You are
special. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Asking Entertainment.
And I'm Mom Entertainment.
Have a toon-tastic day.
Peace.
You're a real boy! Whoopee!
The one and only Pinocchio.